Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything coming back at you with another Wargaming in Miniature video. In this video, we're going to continue on with our Warlords of Erehwon boot camp. In this boot camp, we're going to be talking about close combat, hand-to-hand, melee, sword versus shield. Okay, so basically the summary is units charge into close combat by making a run or a sprint move. If at least one charger touches the enemy, both units, the whole units, are engaged. All models take part. Okay, so what that's saying is, let's say these guys are all single file. I know this is an exaggeration, but those guys are all single file. They do a charge move on this guy, which is a run, which is 10 inches, and he's out of range. So he sprints. If he sprints, he'll make it. But remember, if you sprint, you have to make a agility test or become pinned. You'll receive one pin. But let's say, hypothetically, these guys were actually within 10 inches of them, and they decide they want to sprint, and as long as one of the models, which the lead model can make it within 10 inches, so he would run up his 10 inches, and then I'd go ahead and move the rest of these up 10 inches. Okay, like this guy can get up to 10 inches. 10 inches, you get the idea. And these guys would all be right behind him, single file. Just because this one guy was able to touch, they're all considered engaged in the fight. So all models in both units take part. The next step is, before they actually swing their swords, units engage missiles if they have them. So like if this is an archer unit and it charges in, it's actually allowed to take one final shot before it gets into hand-to-hand combat. Like the Romans, when they charge, they throw their pylons into the enemy before they engage with their swords. Or if you're a slinger and you're getting charged by the enemy, you get to shoot one last shot before they close in on you. Both sides shoot simultaneously. Casualties are removed, and any unit hit by enemy shooting takes a pin if it would normally do so. And if you need to make a break test as a result of casualties, then you will do so. We haven't really discussed break tests yet. That's further down in the rules. Now then, at the end of melee and at the end of movement, units fight hand to hand. Both sides attack simultaneously, except where exceptions dictate. Each combatant tests strength scores to hit. Hits are allocated as evenly as possible, and models struck must test resist to avoid falling casualty. Once both sides have fought, units take one pin for every casualty suffered in hand-to-hand fighting. So in hand-to-hand, you get a pin for every casualty suffered, where for shooting, you get one pin if the unit is hit. And then the unit with the most pins, they've been defeated and must make a break test to see if it's broken. The surviving units move apart, with the defeated unit moving first. And you basically just move one move allocated. So if you have a 5 move, you just move 5 up to 5 inches away, and then the winning side can move up to 5 inches away or in any direction, and you have to stay at least 1 inch apart. So it's 6 steps to combat. Now let's go ahead and go over each step one at a time. The first thing is the charge. A charge is a run or a sprint move into contact with the enemy unit. All hand-to-hand fighting starts with a charge. All units apart from artillery are allowed to charge the enemy. We will come up with the appropriate exceptions in due course. Making a charge. A unit must be given a run order, so when his order is pulled, he has to be given the run order, right? So you put the run order down. The player can measure beforehand to make sure the charge is possible, nominating the enemy unit being charged and stating if the chargers are going to make a sprint. So, like in this case, these guys are going to charge. So I go, well, since I'm only 10 inches away and I need to go 15, I'm going to go ahead and sprint. A unit does not need to be able to see an enemy unit, when it charges. Foes are close enough to hear each other and quite possible smell each other. Even if the chargers can't tell exactly where the enemy is, they know that if they rush around the corner or spring in from behind dense cover, they will spot them soon enough. There's no line of sight for charging. You can charge pretty much as long as you're in range. Moving chargers. When a unit charges, each model must attempt to move into touch with an enemy model in the opposing unit. The 1-inch gap rule is suspended during a charge to allow for this. If at least one model in the charging unit can move into touch with an enemy model, then the charge is successful, and all models on both units will fight regardless of whether they are touching or not. So basically, if this guy can reach a guy, and this guy can reach a guy, and maybe this guy can reach a guy, but these guys can't reach anybody, they'll still move the 15 inches, but they will also participate in combat. Now, if the charging unit fails to reach at least one enemy model, then the charge has failed and no fighting ensues, although the player can measure beforehand to make sure they are within charge. It is still possible for a charge to fail because of terrain that lies in the path of the attacker. If chargers make a sprint into hand-to-hand fighting, don't forget to test their agility once they've moved. A failed test will give them a pin due to exhaustion. Okay, moving over terrain and obstacles while charging. If necessary, chargers must make any test required for entering or moving through difficult terrain or crossing obstacles and abide by those rules. Okay, so if there was one of these walls here, right, or if they were behind, a set of walls, let's say, they could still sprint and charge over there. They just have to make their agility test to be able to do that. If they fail their agility test, as you know from moving rules, they would stop at the obstacle. And of course they would fail their charge. Because remember, obstacles don't give you an inch penalty. They make you make an agility test to be able to ignore it. Like you just run and leap over it as if it was like you were high jumping or long jumping or something. Or vaulting. Now, if the unit being charged is positioned behind an obstacle, let's say like that, let's say they're kind of taking cover behind the wall, chargers don't have to cross the obstacle to count as touching. It is sufficient that chargers can move into touch with the obstacle. So when I charge, I would be there, right? And that's considered touching the models even though there's an obstacle in the way. It's kind of like a conductor. Okay, close combat. Close combat fighting is worked out in two separate stages. We have the exchange of missiles and then the hand-to-hand fighting. Both are worked out simultaneously. If neither side has missiles, just like these guys, then we just go straight into hand-to-hand. And it says players, and this is a suggestion in the rulebook. It says if you want to just forego the exchange of missiles just to go straight to hand-to-hand, you and your players can agree to do that, especially if you're new players. I don't think that's wise. I think if you're learning the rules, you should learn all the rules. Okay, the exchange of missiles. If you've got missiles, you shoot. The main difference is that both sides shoot rather than just one. Who can shoot during a charge? All models. So everybody in the unit can shoot. Models armed with bows, longbows, crossbows, slings, or handguns cannot charge and shoot. In other words, you can't run and shoot a bow, or you can't run and use a sling. But if you're being charged, if you're the chargee and you have a bow, a longbow, a crossbow, sling, or handgun, you can shoot. But the charger, if he's got like hatchets or javelins, they can shoot. Artillery that shoots overhead, like catapults, they cannot shoot at chargers. Flying creatures with rocks can drop them on non-flying enemy during an exchange of missiles, but cannot drop rocks on other flying foes. Units that have the down order are not allowed to shoot during an exchange of missiles. Okay, mainly that's because you guys are taking cover, you're hiding behind a brick wall or something, and you're not really poking your head up to see what's happening. So when you're charged, you don't have that opportunity to stand and shoot. Otherwise, units that are charged can take part in the exchange of missiles regardless of whether they have an order die or not. The unit does not already have an order die. Exchanging missiles doesn't stop it from receiving an order. It's like a free action. Shoot. Okay, once the chargers have completed their move, worked out range attacks for both sides, these shots are assumed to take place as the two sides close in, loosing arrows, throwing spears, and breathing ghastliness. Like if you're a dragon, you breathe fire. Both chargers and their enemies shoot simultaneously, so work out the shooting on both sides before removing casualties and placing any pins. During an exchange of missiles, no accuracy bonus is added for aimed shots. Because yeah, it's too hurried. You're like, oh no, they're charging us, let's shoot. Even if the unit being charged has a current fire order, it does not get an aimed bonus. Forced accuracy rerolls apply as for other shooting, like if the charger is sprinting or if it has the fast rule, then they benefit from being reroll. So like because these guys had to sprint, they're going to get they have to reroll because it's hard to shoot fast moving target. The charged would benefit from the cover if models are positioned behind the obstacle. So because they're shooting when they get here, not when they're there. So because they're here, they're out in the open, they can shoot them with no cover. They shoot them with the cover, but because they're sprinting, they get the fast. Once the exchange of missiles is complete, take an immediate break test for any units that require it. If any unit is destroyed or routed as a result, it is removed, close combat is over. See break test at the end of this video. Okay, hand-to-hand fighting. All models on both units fight, whether they're touching an enemy or not. So let's say this guy could only reach there. They'll still fight, despite the inevitable immobility of our metal plastic models. Okay, so what they're saying is that guy doesn't like glide across the field looking like that. He's actually moving his arms and swinging the sword around. Just because he looks immobile doesn't mean he's actually immobile. So understand that it's a swirling affair and everyone gets a chance to strike at some point. So what they're saying is he's not actually standing right there. He might be somewhere else in this unit area. So these guys are moving around. There's a big fight. These guys are reaching over the walls. Maybe some of them are jumping across, trying to get a good hit. Yeah, so they're not exactly where they're at, is what they're trying to say. Models strike once in hand-to-hand fighting unless they have multiple hand-to-hand attacks. Okay, hand-to-hand is worked out simultaneously for both sides unless one side is down. A unit that is down fights after its opponents because they were basically surprised. Just because a unit is down, we don't mean to suggest troops are lying on the ground, groveling. Nevertheless, they are considered to be disoriented and disadvantaged in some fashion, so we make them fight last. Alright, now we're at rolling to hit. So, to roll to hit, these guys have a strength value of 5, and these have a strength value of 6. So you can see, and that's the number you have to roll less than to hit. That number is modified by certain things, like charging. Charging adds 1 to their strength, so they're both at 6. Other things might be if you're winning the combat, you get a +1, or if your weapon gives you, or a magic item gives you a bonus to strength. Rerolls, hits, and misses. Unlike shooting, there's no forced rerolls if you're down or if you're running fast. However, in some situations, if you're forced to reroll, you reroll misses first, find out how many actually hit, then you reroll hits. That's the same across the board. Then you allocate the hits. Let me just go ahead and make my 5 strength rolls, and they all have a 6 because they're charging. Cover does not apply any bonus. Oh wait, that would be strike value. That would be strike anyway, so. Okay, so I've got all hits. Okay, so, and there's nothing on their side that forces me to re-roll anything. And I was able to roll all 6s and below. So the opponent has to assign hits to any unit. Let's just say that I only hit 3 times. It's hypothetically. Let's say I hit 3 times. The orc player can assign these hits to 3 different models. He cannot double up. So I can't say all 3, just like shooting, I can't take all 3 on my leader. I have to spread them out evenly. So the only time you can double up is once everybody's already got a hit. Everybody gets to attack even if they're not in base-to-base combat. And everybody gets hit even if they're not in base-to-base combat. So he can, if I had a guy lagging behind, I could still allocate a hit to that guy because it's considered a furball. They're all fighting. Some of them are on the other side of the wall. They're back and forth. Everything's all over the place. Now, once the hits are allocated, the orc player would roll to resist those hits. Basically, he's going to try to not take a casualty. Cover bonuses do not apply in a hand-to-hand combat. It's assumed that they've breached any cover. They're over the cover. But strike values of weapons would apply. Both have a resist of 5, but because they're in heavy armor, they have a +3 to their resist, giving them an 8. And these guys have a +1 to their resist because of their shields, giving them a 6. So they have to roll a 6 or less. Because they have an exceptionally large, massive weapon, that adds 2 to their strike value. So that reduces their resist by 2. So instead of the 6, they're down to 4. The orcs have to roll a 4 or less to live. So let's just grab the 3 dice. Roll it. He saved 2 of them with 3s and 1 dies. And it's just one of the 3 that he allocated those hits on. So he could say, this guy. But they're not done. He's still, so what I'd like to do is just kind of like set him back a little bit, just to know that he's been killed. But it also reminds me that he still gets to fight back. Okay, and their strength value, remember they hit with all 5, so it's unfair. But let's say, well here, let's roll those other 2. Let's say everybody was allocated a hit. I still would have had to roll for those 2. And let's change the color of the die for the leader. And this is the normal guy. So you can just roll it all like that. Wow, they both rolled 1s. They both succeed. And the rule of 1 and 10 applies. I can't re-roll, not that I'd want to. Okay, so that's actually what they've accomplished. So now they fight back with 5 men, strength of 6. Okay, there's my 5 dice. Strength of 6. They didn't charge. They didn't do anything. They're just fighting. So they are going to throw all 5 dice, looking for 6s or less, right? Those are misses. Those 3 are hits. My knight player says I want to allocate it to him because he's a slacker. And these 2 on the end because they look like chaos warriors. And then they have to make their armor save. Whoop, I'm sorry. Resist save. So their resist, again, is 8. Because they don't have any strength value. They just have an 8. They save everybody. Nobody dies. He dies and give him a pin because you take 1 pin per casualty. Models that fall casualty are removed. Models can be entitled to rerolls. Okay, models suffer damage chart. Okay, because some models actually have lives or hit points or health. So when you strike them, they only take a point of damage. So those models, big models, usually like monstrous creatures, usually have more than 1 hit point. Remove any casualties after both sides have fought, and add a pin to each unit for every casualty it suffered. So if it suffers 3 casualties, it takes 3 pins. The side that has the greatest number of pins once hand-to-hand fighting is finished is defeated. So the orcs are defeated. Defeated units must make a break test and abide by those results. We'll get into break tests in a minute. If all the models in the unit fall casualty during close combat, there's no need to work out that because they're dead. So note that we're talking about the total number of pins, including any already on the unit when the fighting began. So if this unit had 2 pins and they charged and they only accomplished 1 pin, at the end of the fight, they would have still had 2 pins and they would have still had only 1. They still would have lost the fight. When you charge in with pins, you got to make sure you do more than you have. So a unit with a large number of pins is likely to lose even if it gets better in the fighting. Chariots and monstrosities must also take break tests as a damage test result if the test is indicated when it's taken. Where the unit lost the combat, only 1 test is taken, even if the damage result asks for it. So you don't double up. You only take 1. Defeated artillery unit are automatically destroyed, there's no break test, and draw. So if they both have the same number of pins, they both must make a break test, because they're both scared. Automatic breaks. If a unit has accumulated pins equal to or more than its command stat, no test is necessary and the unit is automatically destroyed and removed from play. In this case, the knights have a 7, orcs have a 7, but the knight leader has an 8. So his unit would have to have 8 pins to be eliminated. They have to have 7 pins to be eliminated. Unless a follow-on combat is taking place, as described below, surviving units consolidate their position after hand-to-hand fighting is over. This means the fighters separate and move apart. They perhaps lick their wounds or catch their breath. Defeated units consolidate first. Move randomly to decide which units consolidate if it's a draw. Okay, because they lost, they get 1 free move up to 5 inches. And they don't have to move the full 5. You can move like... Okay, so they can move... And it's up to 5. They don't have to move the full 5. They can just back up a little bit, at least an inch, because there has to be an inch gap. And then the second unit, the winning unit, remember they were the only ones given a move order. They weren't given an order yet. I haven't pulled it out of the bag. So they can still be given an order. Even though they did participate in combat, they can still be given an order. If both sides survive combat, then the winners can decide to continue the fight instead of consolidating. In this case, fight a further round of hand-to-hand combat in exactly the same way. This is called follow-on combat. You can only fight one round of follow-on combat, after which both sides must consolidate if they survive. And as the Knights player was winning and felt like they were going to continue to win, they probably would enjoy a follow-on, so they don't actually consolidate. They just stay right there. They pass their break test, probably, we didn't roll it. They get another round of combat. So they roll all 5 dice. They don't get the charge bonus anymore because they're not charging now, but they do get the winning bonus. So their strength is still a 6. Rolling for 6s, all but 1 hit. That's pretty good. Because he only has 4 guys left. They all are hit. We're going to say this is the one that's on the leader. They have a 6 resist, but because of their strike value on their weapon, it brings it down to 4. Nobody saved, but because the leader has the tough rule, he gets to reroll, and because it's not a 10, he gets to reroll it. If he had rolled a 10, he would not be able to get to reroll it. But tough means you get to reroll a failed save. And he passed. So he passes, everyone else dies. But they get to fight back. Okay. So those 3 die. Everybody fights back. They have a strength of 6. They got 3 hits and a miss. This guy allocates 1 on him, and 1 on him, and 1 on him. Okay. And so we roll their armor, which is 8. They pass all of it. They get 3 more pins. These casualties come off. He has to make his consolidate move first. So this time he wants to move the full 5 because he's getting kind of scared there. And then they can move 5 if they want, but they can't touch him. They have to stay at least an inch apart. And they do. They want to press their advantage. Now he still hasn't been given an order yet, so he can still be given an order at the end of, if I draw his dice out, or die, if I draw his die out. So let's talk about combat against flying units. So let's say I've got a flying unit on the table, right? And he's flying all over the place, Chimera. A few exceptions apply where non-flying units wishes to charge a flying unit. So like these knights or whatever, they want to take on this creature over here. A non-flying unit cannot charge a flying unit unless the flying unit has a down order. A non-flying unit that defeats a flying unit in the initial round of combat cannot elect a follow-on fight unless the flying unit has the down order. Okay, so that second paragraph says, like, let's say I charge them and we're in hand-to-hand combat. Let's say they win. They can't choose to do a follow-on because he'll basically just jump into the air. And these guys, they can consolidate 5 inches, but they can't attack. Okay, let's talk about break tests, because you know that's an important part of combat, and that's how you win the game, by breaking all the enemy's units. So let's talk about it. Break tests are required when a unit is defeated in combat and in various situations where something terrible or traumatic has. Break tests are taken when 1. Units are defeated in combat. Got it. 2. A test is indicated as a result of a damage chart. That's usually monstrosities and chair. Or 3. A unit is shot at and loses half its number in one shot, or when obliged to do so from some special rule. Okay, defeated in combat means a unit is defeated in close combat when it must make a break test unless it's an artillery unit, because an artillery unit just destroyed immediately. In the case of a draw, both sides are considered defeated and both must test. If you're a chariot or monstrosity and you fail a resistance test and you take damage on a damage chart and you roll it and it says something like make a break test, then that's when you would make a break test. Shot at losing half. If a unit suffers ranged attacks of any kind and suffer at least half its current number of casualties in one go, then it must take a break test due to the shock effect. Most units are 5, right? So when a unit is 5, it has to take at least 3 losses for that to be at least half. If the unit was only 4, then 2 guys would be considered half, and it still would have to make a break test. Let's say we start the game with 10, and on turn 1 I lose 1, turn 2 I lose 1, turn 3 I lose 1, and let's just continue that progression till now I've only got 5 guys left in the unit, and somebody shoots us and they do 2 casualties. I've lost way more than half of my starting value, so because I had 10 and I'm down to 3 now, but that wasn't half of my current value, because my current value is 5. So you take 2, because that changes every time you take casualties, your current value changes. It has to be half of your current number of models. Okay, to pass a break test goes against your command value. Well, this unit has a command value of 7, but because the leader is in the unit, he gives him an 8. You just roll 1 die and try to get that command value or less. If you pass it, they pass, and there's no further effect. If they fail it, the unit suffers a d6 additional pins. So you roll a d6, and you add 3 more pins. If the total number of pins is equal to or more than the command value of the unit, then it's destroyed. So hypothetically, remember that orc that we were doing close combat with? And his unit had suffered up to 4 pins, and he has to make a command check to pass his break test. His command value is 7, but because he's taken pins, you subtract 1 per pin. So now he needs to roll a 3 or less, and he rolled a 9, meaning he failed his break test. That means he's going to take an additional d6 pins, and I roll a 1, so that's good. But let's say I rolled a 3, because that's what I rolled earlier. He would take 3 more pins, and there's a problem here. Those 3 pins equal 7. He only has a 7 leadership. He routs. He's destroyed. Oh no, he routs. He is destroyed. He is destroyed. Destroyed units are just picked up, and you take the die out of the bag. Like, he doesn't get an order because his unit's destroyed. Okay, if you fail the break test, but remember those 4 that he had on him, and let's say he fails the break test, and I do in fact roll 1, that just adds 1 pin. The pin total is less than his command value. He is not destroyed immediately. He is routed. So he's, I'm running for the hills. Give the routed unit a run order. Take a die from the dice bag, so you got to reach in and find the appropriate die. Give him a run order if the die has already been drawn. If he already had an order, you would just change it to run. The unit takes an immediate full 2M run move as directly as possible towards its own board edge. Because it's route and it's a run, you don't get to go your choice. You have to go directly towards the closest board edge, or wait, closest or your own? You got to make a 2-move test towards your own board edge because you're running home, and his 2-move is 10, so that would get him right there, close to the edge of the board, and he would take all of his pins with him, and he would take his run order with him, and he is running. He is out of there. Peace. Now, if he doesn't have an own board edge, because let's say your army for some reason deploys in the center of the table, or let's say your army comes in from all 4 sides. In that case, you would run towards the nearest board edge. Now, if terrain would slow you down, you can opt to go around the terrain, but must endeavor to move towards the table edge in the shortest available route. Routed units take no part in the game, otherwise they can just run. It stays on the run order from turn to turn in the same way as a fast unit retains the run. It has to run 2 moves towards the table edge every time it moves. They are unable to charge an enemy, and if charged, are automatically destroyed if contacted. If they have to take a further break test for whatever reason, they're destroyed if the test is failed. If they have pins that bring them to their automatic break level, they're destroyed. If their movement has been reduced, like maybe a chariot that lost a wheel, then and they're only given a 1-move allowance or something, then that's what they'll move. They'll move their maximum allowed movement. And once any model in the routed unit reaches the table edge, the unit is destroyed. And if you're calculating victory at the end of the game, any unit that's currently routed is considered destroyed. All right, but there is a plus side. Rallying routed units. Routed units can be rallied if there are friendly units nearby. So Are they saying they can't do it themselves? Potentially restoring them to battle-worthy status. This happens automatically if a friendly unit within 10 inches of the routed unit makes a rally action. Okay, so let's say he's routed, but there's a second orc unit, and they're over here, and they're getting ready to join the fray, and they decide to take the rally action. When a unit makes a rally action, then each and any friendly unit within 10 inches can roll a d6 and remove that number of pins. So they do a rally action, they're within 10 inches, I remove 3 pins from any and all units. So that one guy could rally everybody around him. That's one good reason to have a general or a champion, because he can just sit in the middle of your army and do rally action. And then a friendly unit that has no pins on it can choose to make a rally action solely for the purpose, if so desired. Like, remember, these guys don't have a pin marker on them, so when they do the rally action, not only would they remove their own pins, but they remove everybody else's. But you can do that even if they're not pinned, even if they don't have any. Okay, once a routing unit has removed the number of pins rolled, it tests its command in the standard way, deducting 1 for each pin remaining on the unit. So let's say he's got a 7, minus 2, I need a 5. He rolled a 10, never mind. He still failed. Continues to route. But if I passed, let's say I rolled a 4, the routing unit is no longer routing. Orient the order die to rally. So at this point I would change that to rally to show that it's no longer running. And then basically you can orient your guy facing the direction you want or whatever. It doesn't really matter because he's done for the turn. But at the end of the turn, instead of leaving the run order on him, you can now pick up the rally and put it in the bag so he can go back to receiving orders. Now some units are immune to routing. They cannot be routed and have a special rule, like some undead or crazed psychotics. A unit is immune to routing when it can continue. If a unit is immune to routing, then it continues as normal in situations where it would otherwise rout. Of course, a unit would have suffered d6 pins when failing its break test, which will compromise the effectiveness to some degree. Okay, so what they're saying is, even though you don't rout, you still have to make the break test. And if you fail the break test, you still get the d6 pins, you just don't run away. So like, that's a big advantage of the skeletons. Skeletons, yeah, the undead special rule, like for skeletons, has the immune to routed. Now we're going to talk about automatic break tests from pins a little bit more right now. Okay, so remember, if a unit takes a number of pin markers equal to its command value, it's automatically destroyed, right? It auto breaks. But let's say it's got a wounds value, and it hasn't been fully wounded, but it still takes enough pins to be auto-routed, well, it's still destroyed. There is something called a wild monster rule, where if you've got a controlled monster or an allied monster, and it takes enough pins that would normally destroy it, it doesn't destroy it, it converts it back to being a wild monster, and that'll be described later. Okay, now I'm going to take this little extra time here to talk about reactions. Reactions, a very small chapter in the book, but I do want to mention it. There's something called ambush. There's also the reaction test. So let's talk about ambush. Ambush is one of the orders on the order die. It's called ambush. If you're given an ambush order and your unit has no pins, the order is automatically on ambush. The order die is left on the unit to show that it is on ambush, and you can continue to stay on ambush from turn to turn. So if at the end of the turn you don't have to pick up ambush orders, you can just leave it on. A unit that's on ambush can attempt to make a reaction interruption during a turn. So a unit can attempt to react and use its ambush on the opposing player draws an order die. So let's say this guy is over on this side of the wall, like here, and they're not really on the wall, they're just, and the guy draws the orc die out and he says, okay, I want to put the orc die on this guy, I'm going to have him do something. This unit can say, I want to react to that. I want to ambush that unit. You have to be within 20 inches. That's pretty far. They're definitely within 20 inches. You don't have to see the unit. Remember, you pretty much know where everybody's at. You don't have to actually see them. Any number of units can react in the same way so long as they all have the ambush order and they're all within 20 inches. When multiple units are reacting to the same enemy, the reacting units act one at a time. Like you might want to shoot an enemy with one unit and then charge them with a different unit. You don't need to say which unit's doing which until it's their turn to react. A reaction test is taken because you don't just automatically react. You get -1 per pin on a unit, and you roll against their initiative. And the Knight's initiative is 6. The Orc's initiative is 6. So let's say they had a pin on them. Then their reaction would be a 5 because their initiative -1. Now you always use against the highest initiative. So you'd go against the leader's initiative, which just happens to be a 6 as well. But if you have a hero, let's say this is a hero, and he has the hero stat on his unit card, then he can give, and if they're within 10 inches, they can use his initiative, like he's telling them to go do this. Okay, to make the test, you roll a die, just like all other tests. You roll a die, and you got to get less than your initiative. And in this case, it would be a 5 because of the pin. So you roll a die, try to get a 5, I got a 2, that's great. They react. So you change the ambush order into the order that you want it to be. Well, I want it to be run because I'm going to charge those guys. Well, this guy doesn't have to go over the wall, so he would just charge in, and that basically says they've all successfully charged, but now I want to make an agility test to see if I get over that wall, which is a 5 or less. They do, so then I can just go da 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 da, base to base, base to base, base to base, that kind of stuff. Even though it's not really important because I can just put them right there because the wall doesn't really go into effect. The reaction is taken the same way as an actual order. If you wish to react by rallying, then you can do that. If you want to react by going down, there's no test. You just automatically go down. So like, let's say they declare to shoot at you and you're on ambush, and you can react to go down because that gives them a reroll on hits. You can run as a reaction in any situation. You can sprint, you can charge. Okay, so let's get back to these guys. Let's say, this might be a little complicated, so let's take this wall out of the way. Let's say their action when they get the die, they put run down because they want to charge them. So they say, I'm going to take this unit, I'm going to charge those guys. And because they're pinned, right? They got that one pin on them. I'm going to charge them. As their ambush, he says, well, I'm going to countercharge. I'm going to charge you too. So he makes his reaction test. He passes. They meet halfway. So you move up, like whatever the distance is, you half it. They move there, they move there. Basically, they charge each other. Okay, and it doesn't matter if this unit was declaring to charge against them. If they declare a charge against them and they say, I'm going to react by charging them, then you gotta kind of figure out where the contact is actually made. Do a little math, move 1 inch at a time, or whatever you need to do to figure out, like, this guy's running this way while this guy's running this way. Once the reaction unit has completed its action, units whose original order triggered the reaction can execute its order. Now, note this. If the reaction results in a mutual charge, then both units complete their action by fighting combat. So it's treated as if they both had been given an order, and then you proceed to the next die roll, the die pull. All right, and that's reactions. All right, in the next video, we're going to talk about weapons and armor and their special rules. And we're going to also talk about chariots and monstrosity. And the follow-on to that is going to be special rules and magic in the following video. And then after that, we'll talk about terrain, playing the game scenarios. And then after that, we're probably going to be talking about the individual army list. All right, so come back and check out weapons and armor.